We are going to explore grammar using this PowerPoint 4-leaf luck. It's written at about a 5th grade readability level. One spring day, Danny was playing with his friends who lived down the street, Zach and Mark. I'm going to look for verbs. I see one here, was playing, and I see another one over here, lived. So that means that there are at least 2 major sentences. I also see a comma. That tells me that something has been moved from a different place in the sentence. When I look at the basic sentence is Danny was playing, there's a prepositional phrase, with his friends one spring day. Then I look for my noun phrase over here, and it goes back to his friends. His friends live down the street. And then there's another structure that introduces Zach and Mark. So there's a lot of complexity in this sentence. Here's my basic sentence. Danny was playing with who? With his friends. And that was introduced just as a simple prepositional phrase. When? One spring day. And that's an adverbial phrase. Chomsky calls them transformations whenever you move things from one location to another. So we're going to watch this transformation. Okay, so I move that adverbial phrase into the first position of the sentence. And I would do that because I wanted to, for a meaning perspective, talk about when this happened as the most important concept that I want to express for the story. And then in punctuation, now it becomes the first word in the sentence, so it has a capital, and that period turns into a comma. One spring day, Danny was playing with his friends. My second sentence was his friends lived, another prepositional phrase, down the street. All right, you'll notice that his friends is the same thing in both sentences. Danny was playing with his friends lived down the street. And live down the street gives us a little more clarifying information about who the friends were. And when that's the case, when the last noun in this sentence and the first noun in this sentence are the same, and the purpose is to give a little more clarifying information about that noun, then you can combine them using a relative clause. So I'm going to get rid of his friends. And instead, I'm going to use the relative pronoun who. So who now is a pronoun substituting for his friends, but it's a special kind of pronoun. It's a relative pronoun. The relative pronoun says this noun phrase at the end of the sentence is the same as this one at the beginning of the sentence, and this is going to add a little clarifying information about his friends. Finally, I have the third sentence. It was just a comma and then Zach and Mark, but it's part of a sentence. And so some of the sentence did not appear on the surface. And Chomsky would call that another transformation, where these parts of the sentence were elided or deleted when the surface of the sentence was spoken. But you'll see that once again, his friends is going to be the noun phrase that's common across those sentences. So because it's common, I'm going to delete it. Because of the transformation, I'm going to delete the verb, and I'm going to mark that with a comma that I took out something from the surface, Zach and Mark, and that's called an appositive structure. Okay, so now we have this total sentence that's really comprised of three related ideas. One spring day, Danny was playing with his friends who lived down the street, Zach and Mark. Second sentence of the story, the three, and it's implied that the three were boys, and so that's again elided, had played 2 rounds of basketball, eaten lunch, and played a video game about a sheik and a prince who battled each other. The three boys have play, and I have to turn that into past perfect. So it's going to surface now as had played 2 rounds of basketball. And that's my first sentence. The three boys, past perfect, had eaten lunch. Both of these are past perfect. Okay, the have turns into a past tense had, and then the main verb can surface either with an ed ending or with an en ending. So we often think that those sentences have en endings, but many times they are also going to surface looking like a simple past tense, but they're not. If it's accompanied by had, then it's actually a past perfect structure. All right, so this is redundant information. And according to Chomsky, I can delete it. That's redundant information, so I can delete it. That's redundant information, so I can delete it. And I can use the conjunction to put those two sentences together. The three boys had played 2 rounds of basketball and eaten lunch. Okay, but I'm going to add another sentence, and in English, you don't keep putting run-on sentences together, and so you delete that and show that you replaced it with a comma. So there goes the comma, and now we have eaten lunch. The three boys had played 2 rounds of basketball, eaten lunch. And now we're going to add the third part of the sentence, the three boys. And again, we don't need that because we know that they're referring to the same idea of boys. So we'll elide that or delete it. We turn that into a past perfect. Had played a video game. Okay, I'm going to do, that's redundant, so I'll delete it. That's redundant, so I'll delete it. That's redundant, so I'll delete it. All right, and this time, since it's the end of that string, I'm going to use my conjunction. The three boys had played 2 rounds of basketball, eaten lunch, and played a video game. Okay, 2 rounds of basketball, eaten lunch, and played a video game. That's not the end of my sentence. We're going to go up here about a sheik and a prince who battled each other. And now I'm going to add additional information. This is just a simple prepositional phrase about a sheik. And this is going to be a compound noun phrase. So I'm just going to compound and conjoin it with an and. And I'm going to start another clause here, another sentence. A sheik and a prince battled each other. So I've got 2 new sentences, or I've got a prepositional phrase, and then I've got another sentence. A sheik and a prince battled each other. So when we look, this is the same as this noun phrase is the same as this noun phrase. And remember, when that occurs, I can change the pronoun into a relative pronoun, and that would allow me to give this information, a little bit of information about the prince and the sheik. So I'm going to change that to a relative pronoun, who, and then complete that sentence, who battled each other. Okay, here's my prince. Here's my sheik, and they're battling each other. All right, next sentence. As he watched the prince beat the sheik, Mark announced that he was tired of playing, and his friend, who usually disagreed with Mark, except when it came to shooting basketballs, agreed that he too was tired. All right, that's quite a lengthy sentence. All right, we look for the number of verbs. So let's find the number of verbs first. Watched, beat, announced, was, disagreed, came, shooting, agreed, and was. All right, so we've got about 8 sentences or 8 major structures that we're going to have to combine into one sentence. All right, okay, Mark announced, and it's going to be a placeholder something. So after that verb, we need some sort of a noun phrase. So we're going to put a placeholder in there. Mark was tired of playing. Okay, so this is going to clarify what that something is. So it's going to provide the noun for the sentence. Mark is redundant. I'm going to replace something with this structure, and I need a noun phrase complement pronoun. There's a pronoun that's going to change Mark into he, and then to combine them, I need a noun phrase complement. It's going to be the same word that relative, or the same pronoun that relative clauses use, so they're a little bit tricky. So remember that the relative pronouns are going to clarify something about the last noun, but there is no last noun here. That was a something. And so now we're basically going to just, use this noun phrase complement to complete the noun phrase of the sentence. Mark announced that he was tired of playing. So once again, when you see that, if there's a noun phrase at the end of this sentence and this phrase explains something that clarifies something about that noun phrase, then it's going to be a relative clause, a relative pronoun clause, or a relative clause, and that's going to be a relative pronoun. On the other hand, if we're combining something, and so the noun phrase, remember we had just put a placeholder in there, this fills up that placeholder, then it's a noun phrase complement. Mark watched the prince. So there's my noun, verb, and then my noun phrase. Mark is redundant. I'm going to substitute Mark for he, and give it myself a pronoun. The prince beat the sheik. The prince is the same. So how am I going to combine these? Remember, when the noun is the same and you're just explaining something, I can use that relative clause marker. But this time it's going to not surface, and so that's called elided. So And now I'm going to use a conjunction as he watched the prince who beat the sheik, as he watched the prince beat the sheik. All right. This is a conjunction that allowed me to put those two sentences together. Mark announced that he was tired of playing as he watched the prince beat the sheik. But in terms of, transformations, you can take something that's combined to an original sentence using a conjunction, and you can move the whole conjunction and its sentence to the beginning of the sentence. So let's watch that. As he watched the prince beat the sheik. Should have been a period, but now it's been moved to the front of the sentence, and so we're going to add a comma instead. As he watched the prince beat the sheik, Mark announced that he was tired of playing. My noun phrase complement. I'm tired of playing. And so we're going to add some more with a conjunction. His friend agreed. All right, so we have our noun phrase and our verb. However, we're going to add greater complexity to this. So we look at the next part of the idea. His friend usually disagreed with Mark. Okay, so we're seeing that his friend is redundant. And so I can combine those sentences. And his friend is being defined a little more clarity as the one who usually disagreed with Mark. And that's going to be a relative clause. I'm going to use who, since he's a person, usually disagreed with Mark. Okay. You're wrong. No, you're wrong. As he watched the prince beat the sheik, Mark announced that he was tired of playing. Noun phrase complement. And his friend, who, relative clause, usually disagreed with Mark. And then we've got another complex sentence. It came to shooting basketball. So there's my noun phrase. There's my verb. Here's another verb before a noun phrase. So I'm going to use a conjunction to combine them, except when. So it's compound conjunction. It came to shooting basketballs. So how did we put these two verbs together? Came and shooting. Well, the answer is right here. This to is not a preposition, but it's part of the infinitive structure, and it allows you to put two verbs together. When it came to shooting basketballs. Very often, these are theory of mind verbs, so it would be something like I wanted to shoot, or I liked to shoot, or I had to shoot. So theory of mind basically gets into the belief of the character that I like this, I want this, I have to do this. All right, except when it came to shooting basketballs. And it's not the end of the sentence, so we have to change that period into a comma. All right, and we're going to pull out that word agreed that we earlier had set aside. What did his friend agree about? His friend was tired. And we're going to use a noun phrase complement to put these together. He agreed that. We're going to change his friend into another pronoun, he. He was tired too. And now I can do another, what Chomsky calls transformation, and I can move it to an earlier position in the sentence, that he too was tired. All right, and now we've got the entire sentence. So that's how we got those 8 verbs to all function together into one complex sentence. We used conjunctions, we used infinitives, we used relative clauses, we used noun phrase complements, okay? Many grammatical structures to make that happen. All of the sentences, however, derived from a simple sentence, a noun, a verb, and then a noun or a prepositional phrase. Okay, so now we can look at this in terms of story grammar. So what time? One spring day. Characters. Danny was playing with his friends who lived down the street, Zach and Mark. What was the setting? The 3 had played 2 rounds of basketball, eaten lunch, and played a video game about a sheik and a prince who battled each other. The problem, as he watched the prince beat the sheik, Mark announced that he was tired of playing, and his friend, who usually disagreed with Mark, except when it came to shooting basketballs, agreed that he too was tired.